Hi, welcome to Healing Humanity. My name is Dina. There's a reality that we live in that I haven't actually addressed, and I want to do that now. I've been reading a couple books that have to do with like new Christians and um, sort of the way things have transformed from the way they were to what they are now. There's a couple things that I wanted to like talk about because I think the first book I was reading was called The Next Christians. And at first I thought this is going to be interesting because I thought it was going to talk about, how Christianity was fading and um, that we needed to do things to either control that or to change it and try to draw people back in. But really, you can't do that. You can't draw or force people to become Christian. It has to come from your heart. And the second book that I was reading is called On God's Side, and it's by Jim Wallace. It's a very good book. If you have a chance to pick that up, I would recommend it highly. I'm not even finished with it, and I just have so many little notations in it because it has to do with a changing of the heart, which is a lot what the other book that I was talking about, The Next Christians, was talking about, where 18 to 29-year-olds don't trust Christians. They don't trust the Christian religion. They're having a hard time finding Christian behaviors in the religious setting. And I have to say that I would agree with them. Through my path, and not all churches, but a majority of the churches that I have been in have had um, teaching of the Bible, teachings of Jesus, the words of Jesus, but the behaviors of the devil. And what does that mean? What does the behaviors of the devil mean? Well, it means honestly that people are not walking the path because you cannot, you're not going to change the world the way had intended unless you can change your heart first. And that's exactly where the church has gone wrong. So there's a lot of people that are sitting in the pews that, like I said before, that might be sitting right next to you, behind you, in front of you, maybe even preaching, um, that do not follow the word of Jesus Christ. And that's what's caused these problems of trust, this problem um, of a removal of people from the church. People don't want to go to a place that they don't trust. So, as probably if you are one that doesn't go to church or doesn't believe in Christian values, it's probably because one of these things here. I'm going to read you from page 4 of The Next Christians. It says, an overwhelming perception of non-Christians sampled said that they perceive Christians as judgmental, hypocritical, too political, and anti-homosexual, among many other things. And they're looking for people to act as a Christian, act as if you were walking with Jesus instead of acting unchristian. And I think that we have to look at our mission as Christians and kind of understand where we're going with things. Things are changing drastically. And these new, younger Christians that don't attend church, they are looking for something different as well. They're looking for people that walk the walk, that talk the talk, that have a change of heart, that treat others by the golden rule. And if you don't know what that is, the golden rule is to treat others as you want to be treated. According to that same book, just in the first chapter, they talk about how the research shows that that over 76% of Americans self-identify as Christians, which is a great number, right? It was much higher in years past, where we used to look for God rather than for ourselves, self-help, but we still have 76% of the people that are self-identifying as Christians. And so that being the case, where are we going wrong? Where did the other percentages go? Um, you know, there's a lot of there's a lot less unity in the church. There's a lot of people that go looking for connection and finding none. We can continue to go to church and week after week and not see the person sitting right behind us, not acknowledging them. And even if you do, here's part of the problem. We don't spend that time really to get to know people. There's no time. You go to church, you funnel yourself into a seat, you sit, you may greet somebody superficially next to you if you're called to do so, and then you move on. There's no connection. There's no true connection. There are ways, like with the Bible study groups, to connect with people, which is great. But in the community where I'm at right now, they see that this is changing. They see that there's a need, um, and a restoration needed for gathering together. That people are hungry for connection. They're hungry for um, a different perception of themselves in their religious walk. They want to be able to open their heart to people. They want to be able to open a relationship, with other fellow Christians, to be able to walk that walk together, which is what it's really all about. That's what Jesus and the disciples did. They walked the path together, always. There's times where they didn't. There were times after Jesus's departure where they went their own separate ways, but they built their own communities. But they always kept in touch, right? They always kept in touch either by letters or visiting in person. They would visit one another in person, and that was their way of keeping those relationships alive, to keep them on the right path, to keep the trajectory towards um, everlasting life with Christ. And nowadays, this other book that I was reading, it said it's not all just about the soul, which that's kind of where I've been coming from. It's about your soul. Well, they're saying it's not really about your soul. It's about how you live in the world. And I thought, wow, that's so true. A lot of us don't think about that. We want the goodness and we want the blessings and we want the everlasting life, but we don't, and we preach about that, right? People will come up and they'll talk about where your soul's going to be and how your soul's going to survive and how you can obtain everlasting life. Great. That has to be part of the message. But what we're missing is living our daily lives with a heart-centered approach to life, to live treating others with respect and kindness and love and connection. Treating others the way that we want to be treated. So the book, I just pulled it again. The book is called On God's Side, and it says here on page 5, well, actually 4 and 5. I'll read you all of it. It says, I am a Christian, and this book is about 3 clear things. First, Christian conversion involves more than just the destiny of the soul. It involves the way we live in the world. Second, faith transcends politics, and Christianity doesn't translate only into right-wing voting issues. Despite what both the conservative and liberal media love to keep saying, but neither can it be repositioned into a left-wing politics. We don't simply need a religious left to counter the religious right. Third, faith should be lived out in our public life for the common good. And that, I guess this book is hitting me really strongly because I've met a lot of people on my path, with God, and I will say that there are many that do um, live their public life for the common good. There are so many more that don't. So many more that are absorbed in self-gratification and desire for whatever they think that they might gain. Um, and not standing on a moral ground, right? They're just simply looking for selfish gain instead of looking to, not to go left, not to go right with the politics, um, not to be so superficial with people, but to really dive deep with people, really dive deep into the relationships, into the conversations, into the change that's really needed, not in not in just the church, but every day. Every day, that every single person that sits in that church, how you behave and how you react and how you think into every single day of the rest of your life. I was in a community, um, well, two communities. One where they were not religious in any way, shape, or form. They were very spiritual. A lot of selfish behaviors. A lot of yeah. I'll just leave it at that. And it had a very different feel, an emotional feeling would come where you were just stressed. You were not able to relax. You felt like you had to constantly watch your back. And sometimes you really did. Then I went to another community where they were believers. You could tell they were believers. There was an uplifting feeling in that community. There was a pureness of almost the air, which seems a little strange, but it's true. And you would go into certain stores and you could tell in that community who were believers and who weren't. Some were playing Christian music, some were not. They were playing, just not good music, not for a store anyway. Um, and I think it makes a big difference. I think it uplifts you when you feel like you want to walk with God and you're trying to do what's right, you're trying to do what's best, you're trying to keep an open heart, an open mind 365 days a year. You're trying to rise above all of the chaos and the judgment and the selfishness and and being self-absorbed. And when you go into a community that is clearly Christian-based community, you feel it, you know it, and it's uplifting. It really is. So one of the other things that the book was talking about is how um, Jesus said to love the Lord God. So basically, the disciples were asking Jesus, like, what was the most important commandment in the Bible? And then Jesus responded, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And this is the first and greatest commandment, he said. And the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments, and that's in Matthew 22:36 through 40. And I guess I probably talked about this before, but Jesus wants us to love the Lord, but also to take that same love and love our neighbors. And who are your neighbors? They're people with tattoos. They are people that have alternative lifestyles that don't match yours. They are the woman down the road that is a single mom. Your neighbor is the man that lives by himself and has no one to turn to. It's the widow. It's the divorcee, man or woman. It's all of the people that it's the homeless. It's the people we walk by every day and think, ooh, I don't want to look that way. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to help them. They have tattoos. It's your neighbor is exactly the people you judge. And I don't say you specifically because maybe you don't, but so many do. And you know that they do. And at times I've been guilty of the same thing. Been judgmental, been um, feeling as if I knew better or whatever the case is. But God is calling us all to come to terms with loving one another as we love Him, as He's calling us to love Him. That's not easy, you know. It we're faced with ethical dilemmas every single day. And when we take that higher ground, when we act as if Jesus was standing next to us, that's when things will start to change. That's when true revival will come. That's when we know that these new Christians are making a difference in the world. When we stop pinning one group against another, one gender against another, no matter what we're looking at there. When we stop judging other people's choices and lifestyles, that's when these new Christians will feel as if they can return. There was a movie, I can't remember the name of it. It's where this guy came in. He was kind of like a wanderer, and he came into a church, and he was barefoot all the time, and just kind of an odd character. And the pastor embraced him. His church grew exponentially, and it grew exponentially because he took in people that were oddities, people that weren't the people that were homeless, the people that were, had piercings where many people don't, where perhaps homeless or whatever, hippies, if you will, I think at the time. And that's what Jesus did. I mean, when we really look at it, that's exactly what Jesus was showing us, not stating, sometimes he did. He said that the least of us will be the greatest. And he took in people that were judged harshly and gave them the opportunity for everlasting life, gave them the teachings that anybody could have had if they humbled themselves enough. So I just ask you today to think about how you can make a difference in somebody else's life, how you can be a true neighbor to the people that are around you. The community that I'm in right now, they're doing 100 tables, which is, gathering people together and having dinner and just getting to know one another on a more personal level, which you miss in the churches these days. When I was a kid, we used to gather for breakfast, after church every morning, or every Sunday, not every morning, but every Sunday. And it gave us an opportunity. It gave us an opportunity for the children to run around and play together and not be structured, because I think that structure it's good in some instances, but it tends to stifle our ability to be ourselves. And so the kids were running around, I remember, in the cafeteria under the church, and long tables, so we were able to meet and gather as a group. And it was a loud room, but I'll tell you, some of those relationships that we made when we were children, we may not talk to them for decades, but we always know that they're still there. And that was built in the church. That was built because of the church and how they connected with one another. And we're missing that so severely. We're so afraid to open our homes. We're so afraid to open our hearts. We're so afraid to share ourselves with people. And I think God's calling us back to that. He's calling us, at least He's calling me for sure, to come back to community more. And I think that when we do that and we truly open our hearts um, to the people that we might have otherwise judged, you're going to start to see that massive transformation and a growth in the church itself. So until next time, keep healing, keep loving one another.